there, Joe. I was just wondering, could you tell us a little bit about Lilac, the project you're involved with at the moment?
Yeah. So Lilac is a urban co-housing community in Leeds. It's 20 homes made out of prefabricated straw bale panels. About 50 people in total, 35 adults, 15 kids. And we came together and formed a cooperative sort of between, well, probably going back to 2007. That's when the project was initially kind of being conceived and everything, and then building up the membership, appointing an architect and building contractor. It's not self-build, you know, we kind of got other people to do that stuff. So it's like self-developers, if you like. We had the role we had was more akin to a property developer, but as a cooperative. So we all stumped up the cash and paid for this thing to be built. And it follows kind of co-housing principles in terms of the way the whole place is laid out and designed. So it's pedestrianised in the middle, all the cars are on the edge, and that creates this really nice, convivial, safe space that promotes community, and it's really safe for kids to play and run around and stuff. So it's like a really nice place to be as well.
Okay, cool. Yes, so when you kind of made the decision that that's, you know, what you're going to be involved with, what were your aims or goals kind of setting that project up?
So I think the original kind of kernel of the founding group, which I wasn't one, I joined about when they're about halfway through recruiting the whole membership. Essentially, it was two couples who were about to get to the point where they were going to have kids, and a very sort of green outlook on life and worldview, and so they wanted to start a family somewhere that was going to be in tune with their ethics and values of being very green, and also that was a great place to bring up kids and create community. So Lilac it's actually an acronym, and it stands for Low Impact Living, Affordable, and Community. And so the low impact living bit is all, you know, straw bale buildings, renewable energy everywhere, promoting cycling and all that good stuff. The affordability side of things is that it has this pretty pioneering financial model that pegs the value of people's homes to what their earnings are, and that's probably more complex than we've got time to get into here. Okay. But it's called a mutual home ownership society. So it's a cooperative, and it has this way of balancing people's incomes. Well, not in the sense that we don't share incomes, but the amount we pay to live in our house fluctuates depending on how much you earn. So people who earn a lot, their house gets more expensive, and that means that other houses in the development can get a bit cheaper, so that people on lower incomes can move in. But it's not a subsidy in the sense that the people on higher incomes aren't paying for the people, because the people on higher incomes get the equity associated with the more money they've put in. So anyway, yeah. So it's really to get to the nub of your question, it's about living in a low impact way, challenging the affordability crisis in housing in Britain, and particularly this kind of speculative model of property ownership, and then about rebuilding communities and tackling kind of isolated, this more atomised society that we're living in.
Okay, so the next question is like kind of around the survey stage of this kind of whole design process. So was there any particular information that you needed to gather, probably more around the people and the sort of people that would be living there, their kind of needs, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, like I say, I'm not sure about what, I can't speak for what the original founders did at that stage. And while permaculture is definitely acknowledged and stated in Lilac's values as one of our guiding principles, I'm not sure they followed a very prescribed design process. However, I do know, because I was present at some of the very, very early meetings, that they were kind of getting out there in their activist networks and finding out who else was interested in joining in. And so when they were talking about having this co-housing thing, at the same time in Leeds, there was like a Leeds eco-village group forming, and so they kind of all were in this milieu of different activists all kind of floating around. And so there's quite a bit of recruiting from those groups, I guess. But then they also went around and did lots of community events in the local area in Bramley, where Lilac's situated, to try and recruit people who already live in that area and see if they were interested in some of this, affordable eco-housing.
Okay. So were there any particular challenges or limiting factors associated with kind of getting the project running?
Yes. Yeah, lots. I mean, I think one of the big challenges that we had was getting the local authority to take us seriously, and I think some of the very early overtures that we made to the council, and the reason we needed to speak to the council was to try and get some land off them. So when we approached them early on, we were kind of like, oh, we've got this idea to build these 20 houses out of straw, can you give us some land? And they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever, come back to us when you see this. And then, so that's one. Getting some land and getting the council to take seriously. Planning permission wasn't as difficult because I think we'd done quite a lot of work with the planners before submitting an application. Getting finance was kind of difficult because we also wanted to get an ethical lender. So that limited our choices quite a lot. And then there was some other stuff around how do you ensure buildings that are made out of straw when the insurance industry isn't really set up for insuring that kind of building. Another issue that cropped up later on was, we use a formal consensus decision-making process across the whole community. So any major decisions, any major decisions have to have we have to have formal consensus of the whole community, and that's quite a slow process. And it's really powerful for building community and making sure everyone's involved and everything. But it works on a very different sort of timescale to how building contractors work. If you've got a building project, you need to be making decisions very rapidly and turning those decisions around. And so you've got this really fast-moving project with this kind of glacial sort of community decision-making process. So we had to kind of figure out how to make those things work together in a way that worked for everyone. So that was a challenge.
Okay. Yes, so you kind of mentioned there that there was kind of elements of permaculture underpinning the project. I wonder if you could talk more about how permaculture was used in the project.
Okay, so quite a few of the residents had already done a permaculture design course, or they might have done it a few years ago and then sort of a bit hazy about what it was. And then me being a very keen permaculture person, I was very keen to bring it in and try and promote permaculture and encourage people to kind of gain some skills in permaculture really. And I was also keen that permaculture would be used in the way we landscaped the site as well. So one of the things I did was, and this was one of the designs for my permaculture diploma, was I did a permaculture design for how to do the landscaping, but it wasn't a design of the landscaping. It was a design for how to include people in co-creating the landscaping together, and within that there was an invitation to come and do some permaculture training, so that people would be empowered to make their own decisions about how they would do their bit of the landscape, but they would do it in a way that was informed by concepts from permaculture. And then the bit that I wanted to design myself was using Yeoman's scale of permanence. I was looking at what are the elements we're going to be designing here, and which are the most permanent. It's going to be like the trees. So I took on the trees and did a design for where in the landscape they would go. So I figured that if other people were less confident with permaculture and they were just going to try some stuff out, if it was deciding where to plant the daffodils and ultimately turn out to be the wrong place, that's fairly easy to remedy. Whereas we don't want to be digging up all the trees and moving them around because that would be a lot more hassle. And that's worked pretty well. Now I'd say more than half the members have probably been through their PDC or done some kind of intro to permaculture.
Okay.
So people feel like, yeah, there's a lot more awareness about it and understanding of it.
Okay. Yeah, and what sort of timescale are we talking about? Sort of, you said you got involved about 2007, did you say? Or?
Yeah, so the project itself was conceived at a New Year's Eve party. I'm sure there are lots of things that have been conceived at New Year's Eve parties. There's this initial discussion at New Year's Eve, I think it was 2006, and then some of these very early meetings in 2007, trying to find out other people who might be interested in joining in the project. And then personally I got properly involved in 2010, and then we completed on site in April 2013. So from the start of the project to moving in, it's late. I think it was late 2006 to 2007. So 6 or 7 years between the idea first happening and us moving in. But I think what I've come to realise is that the day you move in, that's when the real work starts, because it's actually relatively straightforward to build buildings, and there's lots of it's a well-known thing that lots of people know how to do, but building an intentional community can be a lot more challenging, and there are less well-worn pathways to doing it. Lots more stuff can go wrong.
So obviously there was a lot of different stages involved, presumably, but what were the priorities? What were the things you had to get in place first?
Getting a team of professionals who, so like a project manager and a quantity surveyor, architects, people. So when we went to approach the council to say, we want to look at what land you've got in your portfolio because we want to buy something, that we could go in there with someone who was known to the council and who could speak the same language as them about disposing of assets and all this kind of like local authority speak. So that was one of the first priorities, was to kind of put together a professional team and have a professional looking business plan for the project. And then it was stuff like working up the design itself for how the buildings were going to be, and working with the architect to do that. Working out how we would get the finance together, and then deciding which site we would buy from the council and how that deal would all work. Did I mention finance already? Getting the finance in place. And for us, because we got this unique or new financial model, I think convincing people that this crazy idea was going to work was a bit of a challenge as well. So recruitment was obviously a priority, because we needed to have it full before we could build it. So there are all these different competing priorities, I think, and they all kind of had to happen around about the same sort of time. So that, brings it as a challenge in its own right.
Okay. I've just got a couple of last sort of reflexive questions, really. How successful do you feel the project has been in meeting your kind of initial aims or goals?
Well, my personal goals were really about I wanted to live in a sort of eco house, and I didn't have much money, so the low impact living and the affordability bits absolutely ticked my personal goals. And I hadn't really thought about the community side of things. I thought, I guess I had this ambition to live in an eco house, and I had this limited budget, and the model I had in my head was like grand designs, that people go off and they build something out of sticks and straw in the woods somewhere, and I thought that was the option that I had. And then when this opportunity came along and right on my doorstep, but it was like this community thing, I was like, well, yeah, that's just going to be a means to the end for me, which is at the end is going to be an eco house. But what I've actually come to realise is that the community side of things is by far the best thing about living there. That I've got these amazing, supportive, engaged, caring, supportive people around me, and that's way better than having a house that's. I mean, it's great having a house that's warm and fairly cheap to live in, but really the kind of people side of things. So my goals have changed over time, and it's far exceeded any of my expectations, because maybe my expectations were not as aspirational as they could have been.
And last question, do you feel your project or Lilac brings something to the wider community? And what that might be?
The wider local community in Leeds?
Yeah, beyond the project itself, what does
Right.
it bring to the world?
Well, I think it brings, because it's got this mutual home ownership society model, it's the first time, that was just a theoretical model up until Lilac, and so it's the first time anyone's actually tried it out. So it brings I think so far, successful case study of how to do that kind of housing, which challenges the prevailing home ownership mentality and model that we have in this country. And so it's a bit of a pathfinder for other projects that also want to kind of follow in our, well, not necessarily exactly in our footsteps, but so we're kind of able to support people and show them what we've done, and people get to benefit from our learning. Certainly other people want to do a similar thing to us. And it's this kind of living, breathing example of what's possible and what you can do. So since we've been there, the 4 or 5 years, 4.5 years we've been there, lots of other groups who want to do similar things in their towns and cities come to visit us, and they'll come with counsellors and show them around and say, this is what we want to build, and then you can tell that they're all going away going, oh wow, yeah, that looks brilliant. We'd love to have something like that in our city, because it ticks all these boxes on sustainability and communities and blah blah blah, social housing and everything. We provide this kind of living, breathing, hopefully inspiring model of how living in the future can be possible and how we can do it now, really.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers, Joe.
Cheers, Graham.